Have you ever noticed that some people stay in your mind long after they've left the room? You can't explain exactly why you keep thinking about them. They didn't try too hard to impress you. They weren't the loudest person in the conversation. They didn't constantly seek your attention or approval. Yet somehow, your mind keeps returning to them. You replay your conversations, wonder what they're doing, and even create stories about them without realizing it. This isn't an accident. It's one of the most fascinating patterns of human psychology. Most people believe attraction is created by showing more of themselves. They think they need to talk more, text more, explain more, post more, and constantly remind others of their presence. But the human mind doesn't become attached to what is completely understood. It becomes attached to what remains unfinished. The moment someone feels they have figured you out completely, curiosity begins to disappear. And when curiosity disappears, emotional intensity quietly follows. Think about the movies that stayed with you the longest. Often, they weren't the ones that answered every question. They were the ones that left you thinking for days. Your brain naturally dislikes unfinished puzzles. It searches for missing pieces until it finds them. The same thing happens with people. When someone reveals every thought, every emotion, and every plan immediately, there is nothing left for the imagination to explore. But when someone carries a quiet sense of mystery, the mind begins doing the work on its own. This doesn't mean pretending to be distant or playing games. Real mystery isn't created by acting cold. It is created by having a life that doesn't revolve around being understood by everyone. People who are comfortable with silence don't feel the need to explain every decision. They don't rush to defend themselves against every misunderstanding. They don't constantly seek reassurance that others like them. Their confidence creates unanswered questions, and unanswered questions naturally attract attention. Imagine meeting two people. One spends an hour telling you every achievement, every struggle, every opinion, and every future plan. By the end of the conversation, there is very little left to discover. The second person listens carefully, speaks with purpose, shares only what matters, and leaves without trying to prove anything. Days later, who do you think your mind remembers? Usually, it's the person who allowed space for curiosity to grow. The human imagination is surprisingly powerful. When information is missing, the brain begins to fill the gaps. Sometimes it even creates qualities that were never openly shown. This is why obsession often begins inside the observer's mind, not inside the person being observed. They become fascinated, not because you demanded attention, but because your presence gave their imagination something to chase. Ironically, the harder someone tries to be unforgettable, the easier they are to forget. Constant availability removes anticipation. Endless explanations remove mystery. Desperately trying to be liked removes the quiet confidence that naturally draws people closer. The people who leave the strongest impression are rarely those who fight for attention. They simply carry themselves with calm certainty, allowing others to discover them over time, instead of revealing everything at once. When you stop trying to control every opinion people have about you, something unexpected begins to happen. Instead of forcing attention, you start creating curiosity. And curiosity is often the first step towards something far more powerful than simple attraction. But mystery alone isn't enough, because what truly transforms curiosity into obsession is the way you control your emotions when everyone else loses theirs. Curiosity may be the spark that captures someone's attention, but attention alone is never enough to create obsession. People can be curious about hundreds of things in a single day, yet they quickly move on. What separates a passing interest from a lasting emotional fixation is something much deeper. It is emotional self-control. The people who become unforgettable are rarely the ones who express every feeling the moment they experience it. Instead, they possess a quiet stability that makes others wonder what is happening beneath the surface. Most people live reactively. They allow every compliment to inflate them and every criticism to break them. A delayed message ruins their mood. A cold response makes them anxious. Someone else's opinion determines how they feel about themselves. This emotional unpredictability silently communicates one message: my emotional state depends on you. Ironically, the more someone depends on another person emotionally, the less attractive they become. Dependence creates pressure, and pressure pushes people away. Now think about someone who remains calm regardless of the situation. They don't panic when plans change. They don't desperately seek explanations for every misunderstanding. They don't flood someone with messages because they haven't received an immediate reply. They respect themselves enough to give situations time to unfold naturally. This kind of emotional discipline creates an unusual sense of security. And security is something people instinctively admire. Human beings constantly observe emotional behavior, even when they don't realize it. Every reaction sends a signal. Someone who loses control over small inconveniences appears difficult to trust during major challenges. But someone who maintains composure during uncertainty appears strong without ever claiming to be strong. Their actions speak louder than any words could. Imagine two people facing the exact same situation. Both are ignored after an important conversation. The first person immediately starts questioning everything. They send another message, then another. They begin overthinking every word they previously said. Soon, their fear becomes visible, and they unintentionally hand over all of their emotional power. The second person notices the silence, but refuses to let it control them. They continue focusing on their own goals, responsibilities, and personal growth. They don't pretend not to care. They simply understand that chasing certainty often destroys dignity. Instead of forcing answers, they allow time to reveal the truth. Their calm response becomes far more memorable than any emotional outburst ever could. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or becoming emotionally cold. Healthy emotional control isn't about pretending feelings don't exist. It's about refusing to let temporary emotions dictate permanent actions. There is a difference between feeling anxious and acting anxiously. There is a difference between feeling disappointed and making desperate decisions because of that disappointment. People are naturally drawn toward those who seem emotionally complete on their own. Not because perfection exists, but because emotional independence is rare. Most individuals are searching for someone to fill an emptiness within themselves. When they encounter someone who already appears fulfilled, focused, and grounded, they become fascinated. They start wondering what gives that person such quiet confidence. The interesting part is that emotionally disciplined people rarely try to attract anyone. They don't perform confidence. They don't constantly prove their worth. Their attention remains invested in building a meaningful life instead of chasing approval. That independence changes every interaction because they communicate value without saying a single word. Over time, others begin respecting them differently. Conversations feel more meaningful because every response is thoughtful instead of impulsive. Their silence feels intentional rather than awkward. Their presence feels calm instead of demanding. Without realizing it, people begin associating them with stability, and stability creates trust. Trust creates admiration. Admiration slowly transforms into fascination. The greatest irony is that emotional self-control isn't something you display for others. You develop it for yourself. Yet the moment you stop letting your emotions chase people, people often begin chasing the emotional certainty they experience around you. And once your emotions are no longer available on demand, your time and presence begin to carry a value that most people never realize until it's gone. Once people begin noticing your calmness, something even more powerful starts to shape the way they see you. It isn't what you say or how confident you appear. It's how available you make yourself. Most people assume that being constantly present creates stronger connections. They believe replying instantly, always saying yes, and making themselves available at every moment will make others appreciate them more. But human psychology often works in the opposite direction. What is always available is rarely valued. What is limited naturally becomes more significant. Think about the things people protect the most. They protect their time, their energy, and opportunities they believe are rare. The same principle quietly influences relationships. When someone knows they can reach you whenever they want, whenever they feel lonely, or whenever they need attention, your presence slowly becomes predictable. And once something becomes predictable, the mind stops treating it as special. This is why absence has such a strange effect on human emotions. When someone is no longer constantly present, the imagination begins doing what reality never could. Instead of focusing on what they currently have, people begin thinking about what they might be losing. The silence creates space, and in that space, emotions often become louder than words. Have you ever noticed how you sometimes appreciate someone more after they leave? While they were always around, you barely noticed the value they brought into your life. But the moment they disappeared, memories started replaying in your mind. Small conversations suddenly became meaningful. Their habits, their voice, even the way they smiled became clearer than when they were standing right beside you. Nothing about them actually changed. What changed was your perception. The human mind has a tendency to overlook what feels guaranteed. Certainty creates comfort, but too much comfort slowly removes excitement. This doesn't mean you should intentionally disappear to manipulate people. Real scarcity isn't created by playing emotional games. It comes from genuinely having a meaningful life that doesn't revolve around constant validation from others. People with purpose naturally become less available because their attention is invested elsewhere. They are building careers, learning new skills, improving their health, strengthening their character, or pursuing goals that matter deeply to them. Their absence isn't calculated. It's a byproduct of living a full life. Ironically, this is exactly what makes others value their presence more. Imagine two different individuals. One rearranges their entire schedule every time someone calls. They cancel personal plans, sacrifice their priorities, and immediately respond to every message. At first, this seems caring, but over time people begin expecting this behavior. Instead of appreciation, it becomes normal. The second person values relationships just as much, but they also value their own time. They don't ignore people out of arrogance. They simply understand that every yes to someone else is also a no to something important in their own life. When they spend time with you, they are fully present because they chose to be there, not because they had nothing else to do. That choice makes every interaction feel more meaningful. Scarcity isn't about becoming emotionally distant. It's about protecting your energy so your presence never becomes ordinary. When people cannot predict every move you make or assume unlimited access to your attention, they naturally begin respecting the moments they do have with you. They listen more carefully. They remember conversations more clearly. They start assigning greater value to your time because you've already shown that you value it yourself. This is where many people make a costly mistake. They believe attraction grows through quantity, when in reality it often grows through quality. A few genuine interactions can leave a stronger emotional impression than endless conversations filled with unnecessary words. Space allows emotions to breathe. Anticipation gives memories room to grow. And sometimes the moments between interactions create stronger connections than the interactions themselves. When your presence becomes something people appreciate instead of something they expect, curiosity slowly transforms into genuine emotional investment. But lasting obsession is never created by absence alone. It comes from the unique emotional experience people associate with being around you. Have you ever wondered why some people leave an emotional mark that others never do? It isn't because they are the most attractive person in the room. It isn't because they have the loudest personality or the most impressive achievements. In fact, many of the people who become unforgettable are surprisingly ordinary on the surface. What makes them different is not what they look like. It's how they make others feel. Human beings rarely remember every word you say, but they almost always remember the emotions they experienced while they were with you. This is where most people misunderstand attraction. They spend years trying to become more interesting instead of becoming more emotionally memorable. They believe attraction is about constantly entertaining others, showing off success, or trying to appear perfect. But perfection is difficult to connect with. It creates admiration from a distance, not emotional attachment. Real attraction is born the moment someone feels something around you that they don't usually feel around anyone else. Think about the people you still remember years later. Chances are, they weren't always the smartest or the richest person you met. They simply made every interaction feel different. When they listened, they were completely present. When they spoke, their words had intention instead of noise. They didn't rush conversations just to fill silence. They created moments that felt genuine. And genuine experiences are incredibly difficult for the human mind to forget. One of the strongest emotional experiences you can give another person is the feeling of being truly understood. Most conversations today are nothing more than two people waiting for their turn to speak. Very few people actually listen. They hear words, but they never pay attention to emotions. When someone finally meets a person who listens without judging, without interrupting, and without trying to prove themselves, that experience feels rare. Suddenly, the conversation becomes more than words. It becomes emotional relief, and people naturally return to places where they feel emotionally safe. Another quality that quietly creates fascination is authenticity. Many people spend so much energy adjusting their personality to fit every room they enter that no one ever discovers who they truly are. They agree with everyone, avoid expressing genuine opinions, and constantly change themselves to gain approval. At first, this may seem polite, but over time, it makes them forgettable because there is nothing unique for the mind to hold on to. In contrast, people who remain authentic create emotional consistency. They don't change their values depending on who is watching. They don't perform confidence. They simply live according to their principles. This quiet certainty creates trust, and trust is one of the strongest foundations of lasting attraction. People are naturally drawn toward those who appear comfortable being themselves because it reminds them of a freedom they often struggle to find within their own lives. There is also something incredibly powerful about healthy unpredictability. This doesn't mean becoming confusing or playing emotional games. It means refusing to become completely predictable. Someone whose entire routine, personality, and reactions can be guessed within minutes slowly loses emotional impact. But someone who continues growing, learning, pursuing meaningful goals, and surprising others through genuine personal development remains mentally engaging. Every conversation feels like discovering another layer instead of hearing the same story again. Perhaps the most attractive quality of all is purpose. People whose lives revolve entirely around gaining attention eventually exhaust those around them. But someone who wakes up every day focused on building something meaningful carries a different kind of energy. Their confidence doesn't come from compliments. Their happiness doesn't depend on constant validation. They have direction, and direction is deeply attractive because it reflects inner stability. Notice how all of these qualities share one thing in common. None of them require forcing attraction. None depend on manipulation, clever lines, or pretending to be someone you're not. They create emotional experiences that stay with people naturally. Long after the conversation ends, others remember how calm you were, how deeply you listened, how genuine you seemed. and how your presence made them feel different from everyone else they had met. And once people begin valuing how they feel around you, they stop looking for your approval and start hoping to earn yours instead. By now, you may have noticed a pattern. Attraction doesn't grow because you force people to notice you. It grows because your behavior quietly separates you from everyone who is trying too hard. But there is one habit that destroys this advantage faster than almost anything else. It is the constant need for approval. Most people never realize how much of their life is controlled by the opinions of others. Before they speak, they wonder if people will agree. Before making a decision, they ask themselves whether it will be accepted. They change their personality depending on the room they enter, laugh at jokes they don't find funny, apologize for things that require no apology, and slowly begin trading their identity for acceptance. The tragedy is that the more approval they chase, the less respect they receive. Human psychology is remarkably sensitive to emotional dependence. People instinctively notice when someone needs to be liked. It appears in small behaviors that often go unnoticed by the person displaying them. They constantly seek reassurance. They over-explain their decisions. They become uncomfortable with disagreement. They try to fix every misunderstanding immediately because they cannot tolerate the thought of someone thinking negatively about them. Without realizing it, they hand control of their emotional state to everyone around them. Now compare that to someone who respects others without depending on their approval. They listen carefully, but they don't abandon their principles simply to avoid conflict. They can accept that not everyone will understand them, and they are at peace with that reality. They don't waste hours trying to convince people who have already made up their minds. Their confidence comes from living according to their own standards, not from collecting praise. Imagine two professionals presenting the same idea during a meeting. The first becomes nervous the moment someone disagrees. They immediately begin changing their position, speaking faster, explaining every detail, and trying desperately to win everyone's approval. Even if their idea is good, their uncertainty weakens its impact. The second professional welcomes different opinions without becoming defensive. They explain their perspective calmly, answer questions thoughtfully, and if someone still disagrees, they remain composed. They understand that disagreement is not rejection. That quiet confidence changes how people perceive them. Instead of appearing desperate to be accepted, they appear secure enough to stand on their own judgment. This principle extends far beyond business. It shapes friendships, relationships, and every meaningful interaction. The people who are admired the most are rarely those who say exactly what everyone wants to hear. They are the ones who remain authentic even when authenticity carries a cost. Their honesty feels refreshing because it is so uncommon in a world where many people constantly adjust themselves for approval. Another reason approval-seeking weakens attraction is that it removes challenge. When someone knows they can always receive your agreement, your attention, and your validation, they stop valuing it. There is no uncertainty, no emotional investment, and nothing to earn. But when your respect reflects genuine character instead of automatic agreement, it becomes meaningful. People naturally appreciate what cannot be obtained through simple people-pleasing. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or intentionally difficult. There is an enormous difference between confidence and pride. Pride pushes people away by believing it is superior. Confidence remains respectful while refusing to sacrifice self-respect. It allows you to disagree without becoming hostile, to say no without feeling guilty, and to walk away from situations that require you to betray your values. The interesting part is that people often become more curious about those who do not constantly seek their approval. They begin asking themselves questions. Why isn't this person trying to impress everyone? Why do they seem so comfortable being misunderstood? What gives them such quiet certainty? Those questions slowly transform into admiration because genuine confidence is surprisingly rare. When your self-worth no longer depends on applause, criticism loses its power, praise becomes a bonus instead of a necessity, and your presence begins communicating something far more attractive than words ever could. And when people recognize that your attention cannot be earned through empty validation, they begin valuing the person you have become rather than the approval you could give them. Everything we've explored leads to one simple truth that most people spend years trying to understand. The strongest attraction has never been about trying to make people obsessed with you. The moment obsession becomes your goal, your focus shifts away from building yourself and toward controlling someone else's emotions. Ironically, that is the very mindset that weakens your presence. Real attraction begins the moment you stop chasing attention and start creating a life that naturally commands it. Many people spend countless hours searching for techniques, clever phrases, or secret behaviors that promise instant influence. They believe there must be a hidden formula that can make anyone admire them. But human psychology doesn't work like a machine. Genuine connection cannot be manufactured through performance alone. People may be impressed by an act for a short time, but they become deeply attached to authenticity that remains consistent over time. Think about the individuals who quietly earn respect wherever they go. They rarely demand recognition. They don't constantly remind others of their achievements or seek opportunities to prove their importance. Their confidence isn't loud because it doesn't need witnesses to exist. They know who they are, and that certainty shapes every decision they make. They walk into a room without trying to become the center of attention, yet people notice them because their presence feels grounded rather than desperate. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing attraction is something they create during conversations. In reality, attraction is often created long before anyone says a single word. It is reflected in the way you carry yourself, the standards you refuse to compromise, the discipline you maintain when no one is watching, and the purpose that gives your life direction. These invisible qualities quietly influence how people perceive you, even if they cannot explain why. Purpose is especially powerful because it changes your relationship with attention. When your life revolves around meaningful goals, your energy naturally moves toward growth instead of approval. You stop measuring your value by how many people notice you or respond to you. Instead, your satisfaction comes from becoming better than you were yesterday. Ironically, this shift makes you more attractive because people are naturally drawn toward those who appear to have a destination beyond social validation. There is another reason inner strength creates lasting attraction. Emotionally grounded people do not force connections that are not meant to exist. They understand that not everyone will appreciate them, and they no longer see that as a personal failure. They don't waste months trying to convince someone to stay, to understand them, or to choose them. They respect the freedom of others while protecting their own peace. That quiet confidence communicates abundance instead of fear, and abundance is incredibly attractive because it reflects emotional security. Perhaps the most misunderstood part of attraction is this: people often become obsessed not because they know everything about you, but because your character gives them something they rarely encounter. Calm in moments of chaos, confidence without arrogance, kindness without weakness, independence without isolation, purpose without the need for applause. These qualities create an emotional experience that lingers long after the interaction has ended. Over time, people begin associating you with stability, clarity, and strength. They trust your words because your actions consistently support them. They remember your presence because it never felt forced. Even when you are not around, the emotional impression remains. They replay conversations, reflect on your perspective, and wonder what makes you different. Without realizing it, They are no longer responding to what you said. They are responding to who you have become. This is why lasting attraction can never be separated from personal growth. Every lesson we've discussed, embracing mystery, mastering your emotions, valuing your time, creating meaningful emotional experiences, and freeing yourself from the need for approval, points toward the same destination. None of these habits exist to manipulate people. They exist to transform your character. And when your character changes, the way people respond to you changes naturally. In the end, the people who leave the deepest mark on others are rarely those who spent their lives trying to be unforgettable. They are the ones who became so deeply rooted in their own purpose, discipline, and self-respect that others couldn't help but remember them, even without ever fully understanding why.